Welcome to the One for the Road podcast. I am Mr. C, and Mr. K is my partner in crime. We are going to discuss today all things that relate to electromagnetic energy in the solar system and natural events that are linked to these on the home that we call Earth. So we have looked into someone named Stefan Burns. I believe he's a geophysicist, and he does podcasts on YouTube and watches things like solar events and tracks solar events in time. And since we have had an outbreak over the past couple of years of natural events, i.e., tornadoes, hurricanes, earthquakes, and potentially some volcanoes. We thought we would discuss that today and how that relates to where we are in the solar system and what type of events are happening on our sun.
Yeah.
So John has some statistics here that we thought we would share about tornadoes because it has been, I believe, a large outbreak over the past couple of years that we have not seen in quite a while.
Yes. So if we break down the numbers, there's been an incredible uptick in the number of tornadoes in the US. Last year was the second highest since 1946 with over 1,700 tornadoes. The record breaker for the number of tornadoes in the US was during 2004. It was 1,817. And like I just stated, second was last year. Now, as of May 25th, we've had over 1,000. We are on pace of cracking the 2,000 mark and shattering the 2004 mark of 1,800.
Isn't that interesting?
Yes.
And back to Mr. Stefan Burns. He pretty much nailed it and predicted that a major earthquake was going to happen, and then the horrible one in uh, it was either Indonesia or Thailand about 2 months ago happened, and then we had a very odd event within the last month at Yellowstone Park, where one of the geysers ejected, they call it an explosion, essentially ejected quite a bit of matter that was not water and sent people running. And that area, Yellowstone, is still closed to this day. So very very odd scenarios happening. And what Mr. Burns has said is that there are a large number of what he calls coronal holes in the sun, which eject electromagnetic radiation, and that those waves are actually somewhat trackable through space as to when they are going to hit the Earth. And so he is batting 1,000 for predicting natural events based on the timing of these electromagnetic waves from the sun and from other sources potentially in the universe, i.e., things that they consider to be dark clouds of electromagnetic energy floating through the solar system. We are seeing this rash of not just tornadoes but tremendous natural disasters. And I think one of the thoughts of that is that the Earth is a big ball of magnetic metal at its core, molten at its core, and that when that electromagnetic energy hits the Earth, it creates things to happen like earthquakes, volcanoes, tornadoes. The whole premise of a thunderstorm, if I understand it correctly, is electromagnetic energy stored in our ionosphere, which is part of our atmosphere, part of our upper atmosphere, essentially builds up and is looking for a source to complete the connection, and that happens to be the ground on the earth since it is, and that
Right.
pretty much explains how lightning works in its simplest form. So you start to see these storms pop up, and to John's point, you see things like record numbers of tornadoes, extremely strong hurricanes that have
Right.
erratic behavior. So it's not just the extremely strong hurricanes; it is that some of the hurricanes that have hit Florida within the past year have had very erratic behavior that they have not observed. Like, in other words, this thing changed direction for no apparent reason, and where it's unclear, and that is not a normal pattern that you would see with a storm. So what creates these oddities in the weather and so forth.
Yeah, there's been a lot of, you bring up a good point with hurricanes and that. I haven't tracked the data with that, but I mean, we seem to be on a record pace there. The other thing that seems a little peculiar over the last 5 or 10 years that we haven't seen, and especially in the 70s and 80s when we grew up, is the prevalence of these storms in the spring and even some in the winter. I
Right.
mean, some of the worst storms ever have occurred in the winter, and they're not, snowstorms. I'm not talking snowstorms, folks. I'm talking tornadoes and hurricanes. So there is this walking theory of that, for, along with all of the solar disturbances going on, what seems interesting is the frequency of these storms and these natural disasters occurring in the springtime and not the summer. So in Tornado Alley in Oklahoma and all that stuff, when we grew up in the 70s and 80s, that was always the summer. It wasn't the spring. It wasn't like, the winter. I mean, winter, there's some storms that have occurred like on March 18th. Well, that's winter, folks.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And that's ironic that you bring that up, John, because hurricane season, I believe, is from like the end of July into the end of October
Right.
is what's
Exactly.
considered hurricane season. So if you're getting oddities of events there, you're getting them out of season.
Oh, yes.
So that's
Yeah.
very
And that's what they're
interesting.
saying is that they're really disturbed at the frequency of these in the spring. It's just unheard of.
Yeah, and so that could possibly be explained. One of the things. So they just had a month ago had that event at what is it, Biscuit Bay
Oh,
or
yeah. Basin.
Biscuit Basin. Thank you.
Yeah.
Um, where it ejected a bunch of matter. They basically consider that an explosion. There are some people. It's a known fact that underneath Yellowstone is a super volcano.
Right.
And so there are also some thoughts about Mount St. Helens, which has had a massive eruption in 1980 and blew the top off and killed quite a number of people. Uh, that there are events happening there that mimic the 1980 scenario, and there may be some connection between Mount St. Helens as a volcano and and Yellowstone, and now Yellowstone ejecting all this weird matter out of what is a water, has previously been a water geyser.
Right.
And so
Well,
you see that, you go back a couple of months and you see the earthquakes that were happening and kind of connected by Stefan Burns to this uh, these solar magnetic radiation ejections and stuff of that nature. I know pre to starting the podcast, we talked about the Carrington event, which
yeah, the solar
you're
flare in
you're welcome to, if you have
1959.
the details up on that, you're welcome to explain that
I
to
remember
us.
some of it, and well, you remember some too. In on September 1st and September 2nd, in 1859, a solar flare uh, knocked out all, at the time. We're talking 1859, all the telegraph stations, and some even caught fire.
And isn't that ironic? Yes. So the equivalent of that right now is basically an EMP type event, and it would be considerably more catastrophic if that happened right now than it was. Oh, I
Oh
can't
yeah,
wire money from New York to San Francisco anymore because
right,
the
right.
telegraph stations are down for 2 years. Now you're talking about the power grid. So, but for even bigger events, if you were to have Yellowstone erupt, then that would be a catastrophic event, not because lava and molten rock are thrown all over the place. Obviously, that does happen. The bottom line is that the smoke that comes out of the volcano travels the world and creates,
Right,
like, but basically blackouts all over the world. And
right.
so these events essentially rang a bell for both of us, I think, in watching some of these other podcasts of qualified experts about wow, all these weather events are getting stronger. To initially, myself and John started talking about tornadoes because those are becoming stronger within the last 10 years, I believe. Um, uh, One of the most powerful tornadoes actually picked up a truck. This is a record, and sadly enough, there was a fatality in this. Picked up a truck off of a highway and ejected it over a mile away.
Wow.
So somebody was in a truck being carried by a tornado through the sky for 1 mile before it dropped them, and leading to their unfortunate demise.
Yeah, I think that was in
So,
2011. It was in Kentucky. That was an F5. They clocked the wind at about 300 miles an hour. The highest MPH for a wind ever was 321 in Oklahoma in 1999. So this was up there.
yep,
And
yep.
with F5s, they're saying that the wind speeds are usually around the 300 mile an hour mark.
And right. And so I would love to see the statistic, not that I have it, of how many F5 tornadoes or F3 to F5 tornadoes that that are the total over the past 2 years have constituted. So not only are we getting more tornadoes, are the tornadoes that we are getting becoming stronger?
So
Um,
I have those stats, Chris, and the F5s, thankfully, are have been zero over the last like 7 or 8 years,
oh, okay.
according to the data I'm looking at. Excuse me. F4s have really picked up. The F3 numbers are really disturbing and really high.
Okay. So
So
that,
thankfully, there haven't been a lot of F5s, but
right. Yeah.
F3s have really increased.
Yeah. From an F3 perspective, that's still a tornado that flattens. So in watching a bunch of these tornado videos. So F3 is flattening your house for sure, and
Oh yeah.
flattening your stick built house. An F5, they believe, is actually if you had a poured slab foundation, it is picking up the poured slab concrete foundation from the ground.
Yeah.
That's what they believe. And so some of the strongest category damage of categories like F5s, were determined by it actually ripped trenches into the ground a
Wow.
foot to 2 feet deep. So what they knew where that actually went down, it actually cut a trench into the ground. And so
Man.
that's how powerful the wind actually was. And it did, in fact, pick up concrete slab foundations and rip it out of the ground. So
Yeah.
the
Thankfully,
amount of that force is insane.
they're saying the last F5 was in 2013, but to your point, the F3 numbers are pretty scary. 2024, which had the second most tornadoes ever since 1946, is the data I have. There were 767 F3s.
That is 150 miles an hour winds
Yeah,
plus, and
yeah,
that is if you were driving a big truck, it's on its side, very likely. And you might, if you had a small car, maybe you're close enough to the ground to not let that happen. But if you had anything that is a wind shield or shear associated with your vehicle, it's pretty much on its side, I would
right,
say. And so very, very interesting scenario. The question is the raise in Mount St. Helens and the explosion at Yellowstone, is that an indicator for a coming major volcanic eruption in the U.S. in the near
right. And
future?
it could be so. What you stated earlier during some of those eruptions and explosions, what was disturbing, like you said, it isn't just smoke and water. There's mud. And we know,
Right.
mud
Right.
might be a precursor to lava, folks. The
Exactly.
other thing,
Exactly.
sorry, the other thing is Yellowstone is on volcanic watch.
Oh, okay. So yeah. So there you are, and they so you look at that aspect of things and say, what is next, and is this a precursor for lots of natural events to increase into, some people say 2028, some people say 2030. There are some thoughts that events in 2028 will be that major dark clouds of matter will be passing by the Earth in 2028, and that will be a substantial disruption of anything that is affected by magnetic radiation, by intensive magnetic radiation, which unfortunately would be the power grid. But
Yeah, yeah, we'd have a lot more damage than we did in 1859.
exactly.
I mean, that was pre-telephone, 1859.
Exactly. Yeah, the founding of central banking. Wire me some money.
Yeah,
So,
I was reading when we were about to discuss this topic. They're saying that the sun is been immersed lately with a halo of dark matter.
and that's extremely interesting because when they say dark matter, who knows? I'm not an astrophysicist, but so who knows exactly what it is? But the speculation by people who do know what it is it's electromagnetic. It's a cloud of electromagnetic radiation, just like I won't say just like, but similar in nature to a cloud in the ionosphere that essentially contains too much electrical charge and discharges it during a storm known as lightning.
Right.
And so that kind of gives you an idea of what if this is what if this is the solar system version of a cloud full of lightning, and
Right.
and the
Right.
earth runs into it, and then it becomes this electromagnetic storm that is not associated with a couple of counties in your area as the storm floats by. It's associated with half the earth, hey, one hemisphere of the earth that happens to hit this thing
Right.
when it is floating by.
Well,
And
the other thing to back that argument up that I found an article on, Chris, was recently they've discovered cosmic tornadoes raging through the Milky Way.
oh, really?
Yes.
That's a new one.
Yeah.
That's a new one on me, man. That's
Space
interesting.
tornadoes, they're calling them, and they're raging through the Milky Way.
Which to
This is recent too. This is like a couple months ago.
think about that. That totally makes sense in
Mhm.
the aspect of what happens on Earth is in natural events. Why wouldn't that happen in the out
Is
in the solar system? Because
yep.
these are naturally occurring events, presumably, that are caused by electromagnetic forces, and by the
Right.
properties of magnetic radiation and waves and stuff like that. Why couldn't this happen somewhere else out in the solar system? We
Right.
don't create this. This is created out of nature, and nature and the earth and the solar system are part of the greater nature of things. Nature
Right.
does not just apply to this planet, it applies to everywhere in the
Right.
universe. So I would
Right. Right.
say that this is common here and could be common with the right circumstances happening out in the solar system. Yeah.
Well, there is another theory on why there is an increase in tornadoes and earthquakes, and it comes from our friend Al Gore in
Oh, good Lord.
2006 with the inconvenient truth in that it's
Yeah.
global warming, Chris.
Well, and
So
so
the earth has
here's
gotten so warm now that is, and with rushes of warm and cold air, that is what's producing the huge number of thunderstorms, tornadoes, and hurricanes.
yeah, well, so here is your choice with that. You can buy a carbon credit from Al Gore because he owns the exchange, or
Yes.
did a while back. Isn't that ironic? Um, or you can use science for free and actually
Right.
make determinations which are much more supported by scientists in these fields. And so
Yes.
you have your own choice as to what you want to believe, but the bottom line is that my theory is probably much more likely, and it's free.
Right. Right. It, I'll leave it at this as a brief comment is I don't know why the son of a Tennessee politician became such the scientist when
Exactly,
he was
exactly,
roaming the halls of Congress and the White House for most
exactly.
of his
Yeah,
life.
and you would think it becomes related to him owning, at one point in time before it collapsed, a third of the carbon exchange. So
Yes.
who in Chicago, in not to give Chicago or any of their fine sports teams a black eye, but Chicago has a bit of a history of being a criminal empire.
No. Are you kidding me?
So, ironically enough, that's where Al set up his exchange.
Mm, interesting. The home of Al Capone.
Exactly. Al Gore, Al Capone. What's the
He's
difference?
got this. The last thing I'll comment on Mr. Gore is he has this thing called the Climate Reality Project. If you want a good read, I suggest you go to the website. It's highly interesting.
Yeah,
I'll leave it at
I
that.
think I'd hit Stefan Burns's podcast
Yes,
before
yes,
I hit the Al Gore site.
yes. If you go down both resumes, you might want to lean towards the more scientific approach.
Exactly. And one's a scientist and one's a crook.
Excuse me.
Take your pick.
Yeah, take your pick.
Yeah.
Take
So,
your pick.
ironically enough, so could that also, this leads to the volcanic thing. So, it is a known fact that we float around on tectonic plates above a magnetic core in the Earth, even though it is a molten magnetic core. Um, could all this magnetic radiation also do things like move the plates substantially more than they have moved in a long time, which creates earthquakes and volcanoes? um, uh, but also, which is a known fact, we are have had the magnetic poles moving. Magnetic north has moved substantially in the past 20 to 30 years, and so could it possibly be a precursor to pole shift, which
Right, right,
has known to happen? Now, the minor pole shift is basically north becomes south and south becomes north, which has very little impact um, on people, opposed to there is a new North Pole and a new South Pole, and they're nowhere near what the old North Pole and
right,
the old South
right,
Pole
right.
are, which would be which that leads to thoughts of like, was there a continent of Atlantis or whatever
Right, right,
that essentially no longer is above water?
right, right. Well, to your point a little bit, it seems like we're due for a cycle. So you had mentioned Mount St. Helens was 1980. That is exactly 45 years. So
Yep.
one would think these things run in cycles, and we might be approaching a cycle.
So that's an excellent point, John, in the fact that there was also some discussion of the Mayan calendar, which was a 2000-year calendar, to my knowledge. And how, and was that maybe predicting or a precursor to warning us that every 2000 years, the rotation of the solar system, just like the rotation of the earth around the sun for 1 year, the rotation of the solar system actually runs in to a area which is ripe for things like uh, solar tornadoes, dark
Right,
matter clouds, make active massive coronal holes in the sun to eject these electromagnetic waves and stuff like that. So we run into this area and pass through this area. And I kind of alluded to that aspect, which was some people are predicting the pinnacle of that is somewhere between 2028 and 2030. If that
right,
is in fact true, the pinnacle of that would be between 2028 and 2030, where we run into all this dark matter energy and magnetic radiation from space hitting the Earth.
Yeah, I mean, 2059 will mark the 200-year anniversary of the Carrington effect. And like you stated earlier, imagine if a solar flare hits us and
Right.
knocks out the grid.
You got it. Right. Exactly. Well, and not just the grid, unless you have a Faraday cage, all modern electronics are
Right,
fried,
right,
including
right,
including your car.
right.
So I hate to say I'd love to have a car that was like pre 1980, but it actually would have a points and condenser in it, which is
Mm,
non electronic ignition and non-fuel injection. So hey, that car would still actually potentially run because it does not have does not. Now your spark plug wires would probably be fried. But the
right,
bottom
right,
line is
right.
that your
Yeah,
the chips that are known as your electronic ignition would not be fried because it
right.
wouldn't exist.
Mhm.
So very interesting.
But yeah, I think your point is that might be really on the precipice of another volcano eruption.
I would agree with that. The volcano
And the and
watch is
the and
very
the events at Yellowstone are a bit disturbing.
yeah, exactly. No, I agree. I agree. I mean, and that is, I believe, it's I thought it was 6,000 years, but maybe it's 65,000 years. I don't have those statistics. The last time that Yellowstone was a major volcano,
Mm,
but either way, yeah. If you want to check the stats on that, John, I
yeah.
don't know, but it's either 6,000 or 6,500 or 65,000, one of the two. So I hate to give wrong statistics, so we're going to leave it up to John. In between sports gambling, there he can
Yeah,
find
yeah.
many other valuable statistics. The I look at that aspect and say that that would certainly be the power grid would be extremely disruptive. But
It was 640. I found it.
640. Okay.
640,000.
What's that?
640,000 years ago.
Okay, 640,000 years ago. Okay, so
So you were pretty close in your first
yeah,
guess
well,
of
I know it was
650.
65 something. So it was a mere rounding error,
You
which
were
is
close to
why
650. You said 650 first.
which is why I don't sports gamble because rounding errors could cost you an
Yes.
awful
Oh,
lot of money.
yes. Yes. Quite a bit. So they have a lot of half points.
Exactly. That, but
You're going to be a
so I'm
winner.
not sure if we can actually gamble on on Yellowstone erupting or what the odds are on that on
Yeah.
one of
What was
our
that? Poly market?
fine on Poly Market.
Poly market. If if there's any place, it'd be Poly market.
That's exactly right. Hey, that's going off at 65,000 to 1. This
It
could
won't
be
be
huge.
DraftKings.
That's right. This could be a huge win.
Yeah.
Give me Yellowstone for 100.
That'll be a good one.
Yeah.
Poly
So
market.
anyway, this was just our fair warning on events that we see happening.
Yes.
Um, uh, and it really did start out with lots of tornadoes. One occurred, as John mentioned, in Kentucky, not too far from the area where this podcast is produced.
Yes.
Um, and that was a fairly disturbing one. We also had one in the 70s, which was an F5 in a place called Xenia, Ohio, and it
Oh
is
yeah.
listed as one of the top 10 tornadoes to ever exist in the U.S.
Well, the worst ever was the tri-state tornado in 1925. It ripped through Missouri, Indiana, and Illinois, and it killed over 600 people.
Really?
That was an F5.
Holy crap. That's an interesting piece
Excuse
of
me.
statistics.
Killed a lot of people in Illinois. It killed some people in Missouri and Indiana, but it killed people across three states. Three states. It ran over 200 miles. It was an F5, winds of over 300 miles an hour.
And so yeah, back in 2025, I'm pretty sure all houses were stick built.
Yeah, it was
So,
100 years ago. It was,
yeah, you want
and
you
what's wild? March 18th. It was winter.
really
Yep, the worst tornado in U.S. history was in the winter, March
interesting.
18th.
And you wonder in that aspect of things, because normally you would think you would see F5s in Oklahoma. I mean, Oklahoma,
Oh yeah,
but Oklahoma
Tornado
comes to
Alley.
mind as Tornado Alley. You would think that the worst one would to have ever occurred
Well, they
would
had the highest
have
winds ever.
originated there.
Yeah, they had the highest winds ever, 321. One ripped through Tornado Alley in Oklahoma in 1999 with the highest winds ever, 321 miles an
Okay,
hour.
so that is the case. You
The
would think that.
worst, the worst as far as devastation, because I mean, it wrecked 200 miles worth of homes
Right,
in the
right, for sure.
1920s was that tri-state one.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And so I do often wonder too, though. It picks up speed in places like Oklahoma because it's so darn flat. um, you wonder if you are safer, and I almost think this, safer in the
Oh
mountains,
yeah,
because it essentially it is a weather pattern that hits the ground, and so when it hits the ground, does it bounce off the ground? Does it is
right.
it's subject to the forces of hitting things, so bounce off the ground. So if you're in some type of valley, are you safer than on a flat plane? And I think the answer to that is yes. I think you're far less likely in a valley to be
Yeah,
taken out by a tornado like that.
yeah, yeah. All right, Chris, do we have anything else? I'm about out of
No, no.
facts and
If you want to do
figures.
the extra there, Mr.
All
Chair,
right. You
I
can
would
reach us via
appreciate it.
email at onefortheroadpodcast@gmail.com. Our soon to be constructed website will be onefortheroad.net. You can subscribe and like us on YouTube. Bear with me. We're on 3 audio platforms: RSS.com, Podbean, and Spotify. I thought I'd remember it. For the One for the Road podcast, this is Mr. K signing off. C squared.
This is C squared. Hey, folks, thanks for tuning in. As always, have yourself
Have
a
a good
great
week.
week. What just